The price of beef is not the problem. The price of beef is a symptom of the problem, which most people don't have any connection to. If you're like most people, like I was about 4.5 years ago, the interaction that you have with our food supply and the indications that you've been getting that our food supply is in trouble happens when you go to the grocery store, you pick up the normal amount of beef that you have been buying every week for the last several years, and that number gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and at a certain point, you have to start looking at other cuts of meat and other ways to stretch what your budget will allow. I started farming about 4.5 years ago in response to COVID because the rationing of animal proteins really woke me up to how fragile our food supply is and how much control there is over it that is exerted by external sources. And it was only since I started producing my own meat here in Western New Hampshire, where we're breeding and raising heritage hogs on pasture. It's a small farm, and we are working to provide breed stock for other homesteaders and to provide small-scale pasture-raised pork for my family and for our customers, and to try to make America farmers again through making these videos, to make some noise about what's actually going on with the food supply. Every year, we have thousands of ranchers and farmers retiring, selling off property to developers, selling off their breed stock to put them into beef because the price of beef is high. So, hey, you can cash out, get your money back, and go retire in Florida. And there's more and more people retiring and getting out of the game, and the market is contracting and contracting. And when that happens, the market consolidates and bigger buyers buy up that share of the market. And so control and centralization happens. And in my book, that's almost always going to be a negative thing unless it's balanced by community agriculture, which is what we're trying to encourage here. And this whole situation going on with the beef, to me, has highlighted yet another disappointing facet of the Trump administration. And before you jump all over me, I want to say this is probably going to equally disappoint people who are politically aligned with Republicans and those who are more left-leaning, because I got criticisms of everybody here that's going to be coming down the pipe in favor of basic independence and food supply freedom so that we can feed ourselves. What's going on with the Trump administration started off with, and I voted for the guy, and I liked the things that he was saying because it was about America first and getting rid of corruption. Now, Trump has ordered a probe into the meatpacking industry in order to help alleviate some of the prices that you're seeing at the grocery stores in terms of beef. It's a day late and a buck short because corruption in the meatpacking industry, to whatever extent that contributes to the cost, what the real problem is that our ranchers are being hamstrung by regulatory agencies, and our farmers are being hamstrung by these regulatory agencies that don't provide any sort of a comparable obstacle to massive producers of meat who just go right through because they have enough employees, enough staff, enough lawyers, enough vets on hand to make sure that all those regulations don't even slow them down a little bit. All of this nonsense in the meat industry boils down to its regulatory hurdles that are meant to squeeze out the little guy. One of the things I made a video about that got a lot of attention on this channel about 6 months ago was how the USDA mandate for processing meat makes it so that small farmers are very challenged in terms of our ability to actually sell pork locally. So as a small producer in Western New Hampshire, I have a lot of people in my town, which is probably around 5,000 or so people. A lot of people that want to come to my farm, they want to buy their meat right from the farm. You can't get more transparent than that. There's direct relationship, shake my hand, look at the animals, see what they're fed, come participate in the slaughter if you want. I cannot sell those people meat unless it is USDA inspected. Now, the mandate for USDA inspection is something that only came about during LBJ's presidency. I believe it was in '69. The Wholesome Food Act said that no meat could be sold unless it were USDA inspected. Now, there are workarounds in how I sell half and whole animals from the farm. This mandates that the exchange of money between myself and my customers happens in reference to a live animal. So I can't butcher 5 pigs and put them in the freezer and then say, hey folks, I have meat, come buy some, because that would be completely illegal and unacceptable. And I would go to jail and get fined and my farm would be taken away. But what I can do, I can sell a customer a live pig and then they can contract with me to raise that pig out. But it's technically their pig at this point. And then at the end of that 6-8 month window, when the pig is at market weight, then they subcontract me to either butcher myself for them and vac seal, process, make sausage, bacon, ham, all that jazz, and get that done on their behalf. And then they pay me that processing fee on top of it, which is all a very complicated legalese way to make it so that I can only sell live animals to customers and then they have to get the processing done themselves, rather than make it so that I can say, hey, if you want to buy a pound of bacon, come on by, I've got some in the freezer, and I can feed my neighbors who have full transparency and access to my facility. They can see what I'm doing. All of those things that we have never had with any amount of the times that we've gone to Dollar General and bought Smithfield pork products and all the other big meat packers like Tyson and Purdue and JBS, regardless the type of meat that you're buying, this regulatory structure exists, and what it does is it centralizes the processing, and the processing is a big cost of meat. It's not just what does it cost to get a pig from a little piglet into pork chops and a 400, 350 pound animal live weight ready to go to the butcher. That cost is only part of it, because then there is the processing cost. I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass and tell you that the big producers out in Iowa, 10,000 pigs in a barn, that raise their animals 100% on confinement, that they're immoral and ethically, terrible, because end of the day, those, vegan propaganda films that you see, they will paint this image of the industrial meat business as being cruel to animals. And I can tell you that unhealthy, neglected, skinny, sick, miserable animals are not going to make anybody any money. And those companies are run by people that at every step in the process need to make money. So they control everything, and it is not I would argue, the best way to raise pork. But there's a need to have big processors, because big processors at scale, and when you scale up, you're able to cut costs down, but you're always trading things off in the process. If you're buying a pig from somebody who raises that pig on their own, I can tell you that my pigs got acorns this fall, they got pumpkins this fall. That's going to affect the quality of the meat. I don't send my pigs to the butcher at 6 months. I send them at 8-9 months, because I want them to get a little bit fatter, because I want them to have intramuscular marbling. So my pork is going to be dark from my animals living on pasture. So my pork looks like a ribeye. When you look at one of my pork chops, it doesn't look like, chicken breast that has no intramuscular fat, and the fat is where all the flavor is. And I can do all these little things to give additional quality to my meat that wouldn't make sense if I'm operating at scale. But the cost that you're sacrificing, like when you're buying Smithfield pork at Dollar General, you're paying a lot less because there's a massive scale that company is operating at. And what's going on right now is there are things being done to not really effectively change the system that punishes small farmers. And you might have noticed this during COVID, where there was a couple of processing plants that shut down or got limited in their hours of operation, and all of a sudden, meat all over the country is getting more expensive, it's getting rationed, and it's like there was a processor out in Kansas or maybe in somewhere well away from the East Coast, and yet we're seeing all this blowback consequentially, and that's because our food supply is centralized. And it's centralized because local food production is so limited, and that's because if you want to sell your animal to somebody in a way that most people can afford to buy it and are used to buying it, which is I buy a pound of bacon and I buy a package of pork chops and I'll see you next week. That's the way most people buy their meat. Most people aren't going to the farmer and getting a half a hog or a whole hog or a quarter side of beef, because that requires a lot more cash up front, that requires a lot more freezer space, that requires a lot more of a guarantee that you're going to eat that much meat, and dollars for donuts. it's cheaper to buy it at a little bit at a time than have to maintain that overhead when you got a family and you have other things going on. And so people can't operate that way and buy that way. So you're reducing your market from the people in your community who eat meat down to a very small percentage of those people who are able to eat meat in the way you're legally allowed to sell it as a farmer. Now, why can't you just go along with the regulations, use the USDA? What's your problem? Why do you got to be such a jerk? Well, here's the reason. Okay, USDA plants have to comply with massive regulations. The book to open a USDA plant is a lot thicker than it ought to be, because it's not just like wash your hands after you take a shit and make sure you clean everything down, you have clean working surfaces, etc. There are regulations that get so into the weeds, like you have to have the inspector from the USDA there. He has to have his own bathroom on premises. There's all these little regulations that cost so much money that in order to open a place like that, it's got to be big enough already to operate at scale. So when you have a little town with 5,000 people, I have a half a dozen non-USDA butchers that I know that I could throw a rock and hit their house where I live. But in terms of actually being able to open up their shop and feed the public from what they're cutting and what they're producing from small farmers like myself, they can't do it because they're not USDA inspected. And in order to get USDA inspected, they would have to put in tremendous amounts of money beyond just like the $10,000 to $20,000 that you need to get clean space, good equipment, weather-tight, sanitary space, which is really all you need to provide your community with good food. To comply with all the regulations, they need maybe another $100,000 worth of stuff to get the USDA on board. And then when you have that much money sunk into the project, good luck paying for that. So now you can't just do hogs for local farmers. Now you have to, get what you can from the local producers like myself, but I don't produce enough hogs to keep a USDA plant in business year round. I do a couple each season, but then after that, well, there's a couple other farmers, they're doing that. But when you have a big USDA shop that you sunk a bunch of money in to open and to expand, well, now you have to get pigs from out of state and you have to keep a volume going because, again, when you centralize, you make bigger operations bigger and then everything has to scale accordingly. And the small farmers, the community agriculture gets completely cut out of the mix, and it's impossible for USDA producers to operate this way on a local scale. It's a big struggle. And I know half a dozen guys locally that cut meat and that would be happy to do it, but you're limited when you go to them to have them cut your meat because I can't turn around and sell a pound of bacon to my one neighbor and a package of pork chops to the other because I can't sell meat. I have to sell one live animal, and then everything that comes from that animal can be subdivided and prepared however the customer wants. But I can't kill an animal, have it butchered, and then distribute out the retail cuts in a way that is roughly analogous to how most people buy food and buy meat. And this is because of the USDA, Lyndon B. Johnson's Wholesome Food Act, 1969. Now, the one thing that is being done about this that offers some hope is Thomas Massie's Prime Act. This basically removes the mandate that to sell retail cuts to people that you have to have USDA inspection on the meat. And the one thing that Trump could do to help create competition to compete with the big producers who, okay, the DOJ is going to go investigate them, and then what? That still doesn't do anything to free up small local producers to feed our communities. And that still keeps all of the production of food centralized in a few states out west where you get a bad weather system that moves through. You have some kind of market forces that punish these ranchers, and you're going to be stuck with a very handicapped ability to produce food rather than decentralizing things and allowing small producers and small farmers to feed their community. Am I saying that farmers of my scope and scale, right now I have like 21 pigs, most of them are breeders, farms of my scale are going to be able to feed the nation? Well, not necessarily. I think it's good to have larger producers and big corporations. I'm not here to tell you that every big corporation is evil, but what I'm saying is that small farmers have had their hands tied behind their back by the USDA and other regulatory agencies that handicap us so that we can't realistically provide any competition to the big meat producers. And that lowers the quality and that lowers the competition. And this is all done thanks to lobbyists in Washington that make really good sounding campaigns with all the best of intentions to tell people that, oh, you know what, we really need to be careful for this disease that's coming with the pigs, so let's make sure that we impose this regulation. Small farmers shouldn't be able to buy antibiotics over the counter. They need to get a vet's prescription because penicillin is dangerous if it's not used by a qualified professional who has medical licensure to operate on pigs. And 99% of the people out there, the Karens, the Subaru driving people with the stickers on the back that say no farms, no food, who think they listen to that and they're like, oh yeah, we want to be careful for superbugs. We can't have people like just willy-nilly giving antibiotics. That's dangerous. And meanwhile, small farmers like myself who, like, if I lose $500 on a pig because I have to call a vet out to give it penicillin, I'm losing money on that pig now, and no matter what I do, I'm in the red. I'm losing money on that. I can't afford to do that. So either that pig is going to die, or I have to find an illegal workaround to give my animal the treatment that it needs so that it can get better, so that it can go back to its life and ultimately live out its intended end and become food. But the problem is, people listen to this and they think, oh yeah, that's good. We don't want people giving too many antibiotics. And at the same time, the ones who actually give antibiotics at a potentially dangerous level where superbugs could actually come from that would be your big producers where you have 10,000 pigs in a barn. And if you're giving too much antibiotics, it's going to knock down all of the weaker pathogens. And then what's going to be left after every pig is getting all these antibiotics? Well, you're going to be left with superbugs that come out of that. And it's not saying that larger producers do that intentionally, but that is where that regulation makes sense. It doesn't make sense for a small farmer who has maybe 1 or 2 pigs a year that needs some penicillin because a mama had trouble giving birth and I had to reach inside the birth canal to pull out some piglets. I can't get any penicillin. Now mama gets septic, she dies, babies die, and small farmers are going under because of stupid things like that. And our government and Donald Trump, who ran as, cutting back the DOGE stuff. We want to cut back the big regulations and free American industry and America first and all this other stuff. We got money to send $40 billion to Argentina. We have money to send overseas to Israel, to Ukraine, to whatever other countries that we are funding their operations. And yet the simplest things, which would make the most difference in creating resilience in the American food supply system, is get the USDA mandate out of the hair of small farmers so that we can produce our own beef and process it on our own terms, pork as well, chickens as well, produce it and process it on our own terms. Imagine going to the DMV every time that you wanted to get an animal turned from a whole animal into pork chops and bacon. That's what you're being asked to do as a small farmer. And so going to the DMV back and forth, it's way too much hassle. So small farmers get out of it, and then who buys everything up, and then everything centralizes, and the people are left with fewer options, because when you want to go to a farm and buy an animal that you can see where it was raised and how it was raised, and you want to be close to your food, too bad, that option doesn't exist. And if it does exist, it's very, very costly, because as a small farmer, I have to go through all of these steps to comply with regulatory things that don't present a proportional hurdle for a big company. A massive company has very little effort to get over that hurdle, and then they pay the lobbyists to make more rules like that they know they can keep, but they know smaller farms are never going to be able to keep that. And again, everything centralizes and compresses. And this is not brain surgery. I would say I am slightly above average intelligence, and if I can figure this out, you can't tell me that Trump doesn't have people around him who could say, hey, Mr. President, maybe let's pass the Prime Act. Oh, wait a minute, no, we can't pass the Prime Act because Thomas Massey is bad because he gives Trump a hard time about his support for Israel and foreign aid, and that's a no-no, because anybody that says that we shouldn't be sending billions of tax dollars to support foreign countries is obviously an anti-Semite, so we can't have that. Instead of saying, hey, wait a minute, he might be onto something, let's unshackle the small farmers so that we can feed our country, so that we're not reliant on the rest of the world to feed people within our own community. It's not a huge ask. And the reason why I am one person ranting about this on YouTube, if you hear this and this resonates with you, please share this message far and wide. I am going to continue making videos along these lines because this is a big problem. I want to encourage more people to start taking control of your own food, raise more animals yourselves. Raising pigs is something that just about everybody with more than an acre of land, acre even, right on the nose, you can raise a couple of pigs. And once you start to do this, you'll start to think about it and be like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't realize how many moving pieces there were and how many hurdles I have to jump over just to feed my own family with my animals that, like, these big companies don't have to deal with. And they just have lobbyists that go out there and solve their problems, and then they hire more lawyers and hire more vets. We checked all the boxes, we're in compliance, and it doesn't slow them down because that snowball keeps rolling down the mountain. It's no big deal for them, but the small producers, farmers are going out of business and nobody's coming back in to replace them because the only way that you can make any money as a farmer is to operate at a massive scale. And everybody who is anywhere short of that doesn't stand a chance because of the regulations that are in place that the Prime Act will address. So that's what I have to say about that. That is the problem. I'm going to do another video here shortly about the five basic things that I think that if I had Trump's ear, I would recommend that he does for the sake of our food supply system to make things easier for small farmers. And if you want to see that video, make sure to subscribe to this channel, enable notifications, and please share this because this is a conversation that needs to happen and we need to get more people involved in this. This is not brain surgery, but it is a part of food production that most people don't have any connection to at this day and age. So we need to make America farmers again, and that starts with you. Hope to see you guys around here. Drop a comment. Let me know where you stand on this.